All right, hello again, everybody. I am back to start implementing some authentication into our blog web app. So we're not going to be dealing with the front end anymore. We're just going to try and get auth working on the back. Now, for those of you that want to keep your current boilerplate you're using and not have to download a new one and transfer a bunch of code, this will be a lecture for you. So what we're going to do is keep my old blog boilerplate that I've now updated with being able to add blogs from the front end. And we're going to import the code we need and the packages we need to get authentication up and running. We're going to only be testing it only through Postman. That way we know server auth is running, and then tomorrow we will dive down further into front-end authentication workflow. So let's begin by wiring this up. The new boilerplate, the one that has Passport for us that we're going to be pulling code off of from, and what you will see David coding through the lectures. The package.json will have these things in it. So if you ran an npm install with the new boilerplate, you'll be good to go. But for those of us who are trying to bring in code into our current code base without having to download and transfer to a new boilerplate, here are the things you're going to need. We're going to run an npm install --save. We're going to bring in something called Passport, which is our middleware for Express to use this framework of being able to do different strategies and logins and authentication and things like that. We're going to bring in passport-local. And by the way, if you guys didn't know this, taking a step back, you can actually npm install multiple packages in one line. All you got to do is put a space between each package. So passport-local is going to be the local strategy we're going to be using, aka we're doing a local form from the front end as our rec.body and attempt to log in. So local strategy. Then we're going to need passport-http-bearer. And that'll be that bearer strategy we talked about where we set up our authorization headers to have a bearer token. This is what that strategy will be. And then we'll need something called UUID, which is universally unique identifier. I'm fairly certain. Need to double check on that. Universally unique, yeah, it is UUID, Universal Unique Identifier. Sick. So that will actually help us create a unique and universally unique token whenever we're decoding and encoding our tokens for our workflow. So let's go ahead and install these packages and let them do their thing. Now, if you have the other boilerplate ready to go, like I have it downloaded in a zip on the side over here so I can begin pulling out files that I want and need from it. So the first and easiest thing we can go ahead and copy over is our server source utils tokens.js. So before I mess anything more up, we're going to go ahead and open our code base, ready to go. So source server utils. We don't have a utilities folder yet, so we're going to create that. Utils. And utils inside of there will get a tokens.js. This is just a quick copy and paste in here. There we go. And what it's doing is it's bringing in the universally unique identifier for us. Crypto is a package built into NodeJS. I did not know this until I was actually doing this myself. It has a create cipher and create decipher functions we're using off of it. And then we have some constants of our algorithm and our secret key. So we have a function to encode that takes one value and a function to decode that takes one value. Without getting too much into cryptography, it essentially creates that crazy cipher or decodes that crazy cipher, depending on what we need it to do. So obviously, if our tokens table gets a token ID of 1, it encrypts it to be something crazy, and you'll see that later when we're testing in Postman. And then when we send it as an authorization bearer token, it has to decrypt it to make sure it matches up what's inside of our database. And that's all this does for us. It's a utility. I wouldn't dig too much further than that unless you're really interested in cryptography, which I kind of am after dealing with this walkthrough. So that's the first thing we're going to have to do. Next, we're going to need some middleware that comes out of our next boilerplate called auth.middleware or .mw.js. So that goes into our middleware directory. I make a new file and call it auth.mw.js. Bring that code in here, no problem. So it imports Passport from Passport. And we haven't coded this part out yet. So like we're importing Passport, we haven't actually done anything with it yet. So this is going to be what all the next bit of code is going to be. We create a function in here called token middleware, takes a request a response, and a next, and it tries to run passport.authenticate bearer strategy, and it passes on the same recres next that this is given to. AKA, if this is on a route's going to have a recres and a next, and that same route's recres and next are going to be passed downwards. Then is logged in is a check saying, hey, if a rec.user currently exists, he is logged in and move on. Otherwise, send status 401 unauthorized, and it exports both of these to use them as middleware throughout our application. Nothing too complicated here. Next step we're going to have to do will be to actually bring in the configuration of passport.js, where the biggest chunk of code is as of right now. So 1 second as I pull up this code here. As a hefty chunk of code, and we'll talk our way through it as best as possible here. Cool. And this will go into config. So config, new file, passport.js, paste. That is a crap ton of code. What is it all doing? The lecture probably goes through a bit more clearly than I possibly could. Whoopsie doodles. Probably dives in more in depth than I do. I'm just trying to get you guys up and running, and then you can watch the lectures for the actual theory behind what's happening. So we talked about encode and decode. We know what that is. We know what table is. That's table.js, because we're checking something in our database to make sure it matches up. Simple enough. And then these are the two strategies I was talking about here, and then we're going to be using Passport as our module, so we have to be able to use it. So there we go. Nothing too complicated. You guys have seen this already on your blog routes, where we connect our database tables to a local variable. For my lab, I have a tokens table already with lowercase, and I have an authors table, not a users table. So instead of having to change every single instance of users table throughout here, I'll just hook it up to the correct table. I said to make sure it has the right fields. And the same thing with the tokens. I had lowercase t tokens in my schema, so I just copied that over. So there's that configure passport that we're going to be seeing momentarily. It's going to be passed down an app, and that app is going to be our Express server app. So we pass that down in here into a function called configure passport. And then passport will be, hey, we're going to use a new local strategy, this guy, which will take some configuration. We'll be using an email and password in order to check our login. So it's going to try something. What it's going to try and do is see if it can find and match an email inside of our database. If it finds one that matches, it's like, okay, now what? Okay, so if the user exists, which is the user, the email, and he has a password, and that password matches the one that the rec.body has, then we're going to insert a new token in the token table based on our user ID, and then we should be good to go. And then we're going to encode that token ID, so it's no longer just one, it'll be a huge crazy string of stuff, and we're going to return it upwards and consider it done. Otherwise, if this doesn't match, aka the password's wrong, the email doesn't exist, or the email doesn't match, then we're going to send back a message that says invalid credentials and nothing else. And if some other unknown error happens, we're going to catch it and call it done and pass that error along to log anyway. Secondly, we're also going to configure Passport to use a second strategy beyond the local strategy of checking login. We're going to have one called the bearer strategy. And this is where I was talking about we're going to set our authorization bearer token. So as you can see, we have to grab and decode a token. We're going to assume that our authorization bearer will have a token. So we're going to accept that in the request, which is what that is right there. We're going to decode that token with the function that utility does for us. And if it does not decode properly, meaning if it doesn't match up with anything in our database with decoding, then we're going to send back a response that says invalid token. Just a quick, you donezo, he out of here. Try again. Otherwise, it's going to try an asynchronous promise. So what's going to happen is it's going to find that decoded token inside of our tokens table, get one by the decoded token ID, and then the tokens table has a user ID that each one's associated with. So then it's going to find the user. And if the user exists, it deletes the password from this, I think, local storage to make sure we don't. Yeah, so what happens is here, instead of passing on the entire user object, which would be the ID, the email, username, name, whatever, and password, it says, hey, don't send the password because we don't want to show somebody a password inside of a response, right? We don't want to send that to the front end. We don't want to send that to Postman. We don't want people to look at our passwords. So this is just saying, hey, delete the user. On the user's object, delete the password key and value. We don't want that on there. So then we just send the rest of the user object minus the password. So it'll have, again, ID, name, email, and not the password pass along, and the underscore created, but not the password. Otherwise, if the user exists but the token's wrong, invalid token, and again, just a generic error, throw it out there. And so we're going to say, hey, the app that we've passed down into this function, it's going to use a new middleware of passport.initialize with these features. That's all this guy does. Cool. Again, I know that was fast. That's a quick and dirty breakdown of it. But again, this is not supposed to be a super deep dive into authentication theory. It's more of like, let's get this thing put together and running in no time, right? That's the idea behind this. Perhaps. Okay then. Now, if you guys haven't done this, I realize I should have probably deleted these and started from fresh, but in my authors table, I did not have a password column. So I clicked on this little wrench icon in MySQL Workbench, or if you want to write the SQL for it, be my guest. I included a password column name of varchar45. Sorry, people that have 60-character passwords or more. You have to have 45 here. And I said it's not null. We're not going to have a column that doesn't have a password. That's dumb. That won't make any sense. Cool. So that's all I did in the authors table. Then I created a tokens table. And here you can take a look at how I created it. Table name, tokens, nothing miraculous there. First column is the column ID, which will be an int data type, integer. It is a primary key. It's not null, and it will auto-increment, because I forgot that earlier and had to diagnose that error. So don't forget to auto-increment it, because you want it to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, blah. Those will represent the underlying decoded tokens, and that's what your middleware will be checking. It's going, hey, I've decoded this crazy string of characters, and it decodes to the value 1. Is there a value 1 inside of the tokens table? There is. Does it match to the user ID that the person's trying? It does. Then you're logged in and good to go. Otherwise, you say invalid token or invalid credentials. So the second column name is a user ID that, as you can imagine, is what confirms between the users table and this tokens table which user has which token. It's also an integer. It is also a primary key. It's not null. Keep that in mind. So 2 primary keys in this guy. And that's all the tokens table is. And if I do a quick select all from it, you'll see my one test I've done so far where it says, hey, someone attempted to log in and it was a successful login when I tried my login of test at test.com, password 123. That's good to go, bro, which means this ID of 1 is going to be our token ID, which matches up to user 1 from authors, which is named test. So that's where it matches up to. And so when this 1 is passed up to the tokens utility, it encodes it into that crazy string we're going to end up seeing in Postman. So really not a whole lot we had to do in MySQL Workbench. Fairly simple. I can go more further into that if you guys have any questions after watching this. So the next thing we're going to do is actually hooking this up inside of our application somewhere. So we're going to go into our, close these directories down, collapse them, and then our index.js inside of server source. And here we're going to have to import our passport configuration, which I've copied over from the boilerplate. We're going to import the configure passport. I don't know why there's 2 spaces in there. It shouldn't make a difference, but it's me being weird. Format, there we go. Import configure passport from this directory into config into passport.js. Coolio. Now, I'm not entirely sure if we have to have this in a particular spot. We can play with it here in just a moment. I know the boilerplate has it. It's a middleware, so I think it'll be along with the middleware right here where we're saying configure passport, and let's pass in our app. And that way it configures all the utilities it's going to need before we get to our routes. Right? So it's going to actually make sure our server app has all of our passport local strategy configuration and bearer strategy configuration ready and usable for any routes below it, aka anything in API right now. Cool. And so there are a couple routes that are coded for us for our auth workflow. The first one that we're going to care about is going to be auth.js. This will be our API/auth/login. And as that it sounds just like it implies, where this is the route that we're going to write. And I think this is actually unneeded now, so we're going to remove that import, and there we go. This is saying, hey, we're making a post request because we have to send a body, and that body will be our email and password. And it'll be a post request to /login, and it's going to go, hey, passport authenticate, which is the function that we wrote back in the passport.js section of this, We're saying we're going to be using a local strategy because we have a local rec and body form sending to this. So we're not using Google or Twitter or Facebook login. If there's an error, log it and return server error 500. Might be something went wrong. If they don't have a token, then it's going to say unauthorized. And if they do have a token, it says okay, and it sends them the token, right? So if they don't have a token that matches up with their login and something fails there, you'll get this error, which I actually got my first go around with this particular demo. And then if it is a successful login with no issues, then it's going to send you a response with the token, right? And then it moves along. And then this is what it's passing down as the second argument to the passport.authenticate, if you remember. Yeah. So remember you passed the rec, res, and the next that matched up from the route down into the authenticate function. It took a second argument, and this is what it was. Cool. That's all we need there, and I do not believe you have to change anything at all. So let's close that out. And we'll have another route that is going to be for users.js, I think. Yeah, and users is going to be like our check route. This is where we can confirm that we're logged in with the correct token. So, because we're checking with a token, we got to bring in our token middleware and our isLoggedIn middleware. So this is literally just saying, hey, is this a valid token that we can encode and decode to match with? And is this person logged in? Is there a match between the tokens table and the users table? If it is, then remember it sends the rec.user the rec.user minus the password. That's what I was showing you in that bearer strategy, that token bearer strategy, right? That had the delete user.password. That way when we respond with the user information, it won't have the password column or value in there. Cool. There shouldn't be anything we need to change here. But we're going to have to import these guys into our index router here. So we now have to import, I'm going to just do this manually with you guys rather than copy and paste this. Import auth router from this directory /auth that we just copy and pasted. Import the users router, which is our isLoggedIn guy, right? From this directory /users. There we go. Now we can do this. I'm going to purposefully put as my first router, because remember this works down, it works from top down. So if we put our protection of routes up here, like if we do token middleware and isLoggedIn right here, then we're going to block everything below it. So I don't want to block my login route because I want to make a post request to it. I don't want to block every post request, otherwise I'm going to prevent myself from logging in. And talking about token middleware, that reminds me we should probably import it because we're going to need it. So we're going to bring in token middleware. And we're going to bring in isLoggedIn, and those were from 2up/middleware /auth.middleware.js format. There we go, bro. So we're going to have an API /auth, which will be /login, and that will use, guess what, the auth router. Oh my goodness. There we go. Cool. And so now we have a way of actually logging in and getting a token. So how do we protect the bottom routes? Well, here's one way to do it. We're saying, hey, router, any routes that follow the following syntax, aka the wildcard. We're going to say, we can specify what routes we want the route to be routing from, but instead we're saying wildcard. Any routes below this. Any routes that have a post request. Let's do token middleware and isLoggedIn. Gotcha. Okay, what about edit routes? So anything that's a put route whatsoever, token middleware, isLoggedIn. Boom. And then anything where people can delete stuff on a route or an endpoint, we want to make sure they're logged in and have a valid token. We don't want them messing with our database structure or messing with our information in our database. We don't want some rando to come in, find the delete endpoint, and delete all our blogs. That wouldn't be fun. So what this is saying is anything underneath this guy right here, any matching routes at all, it doesn't matter what it is, /blogs, /Jedi, /Skywalker, it doesn't matter. These are going to be protected routes, but it won't affect get routes, so it's not going to be everything. It's only going to affect adding information, editing information, and deleting information. So without being logged in, we can still do /blogs get all or get one with no issue. But if we wanted to add a blog like we were in the last video, it's not going to work. And I believe that's all we're going to have to do to get this guy up and running. So it's time to start testing. So I'm going to do a lovely npm run dev. Let's watch it compile, hopefully with no errors. No errors? My God. Something's going to happen. I refuse to believe this worked the first time, especially for the last 2 recordings I've done. Okay, so I have a fresh Postman open, ready to go. We're going to go to localhost 3000 /API/blogs. Get request. Works as expected. Cool, cool, cool. What about /1? Still up and running. All right, so that's typically a good sign. The server's up and running. It's responding correctly with the get request. But now, since we've protected posts, let's give that a shot. So, actually, I'll make a new request for it, a new tab for this. So it's going to be a post request to localhost /API/blogs/ that was my my route for adding blog posts. And remember, we're going to do a body raw JSON, and it had a title for a blog. Oh my goodness, I can't click anywhere. There we go. I am a title. Yo. Oh, need a comma. And then I had a content. I'm some content. Yo. Haha, simple. So now let's do this request. Oh, would you look at there? We're unauthorized. So everything we have now hooked up is working. It says, hey, this guy needs to have a token. There is no token, send back 401 unauthorized, which is our response here, right? 401 unauthorized, response unauthorized. Okay then. So if we're thinking of it from a front end perspective, if we forgot to log in and try to do a protected feature on a web page, it will typically be like, hey, you should probably log in to activate this feature. So we can imagine instead of saying unauthorized, it might redirect to the login page on our web application. So let's imagine we did that, and that form, that login form on that page would be a post request that would do this. It would go to localhost 3000 /API/auth/login. That was the post request that we coded here. This is what we're now hitting. And so it's going to have a rec.body, raw JSON again. And looking at my database, back to this guy again, as much as I hate Workbench, authors, select all. It has an email of test@test.com and a plain text password of password123. Email and password. So we're going to have an email of test@test.com. Let's mess it up on purpose. Let's call it test1@test.com just to confirm. And then we're going to have a password of, oh my goodness, password123 because that's what our login information is. So because I messed up this email and it doesn't match up into our users table or our authors table, it should throw us an invalid credentials, 401 unauthorized. Okay, cool. So it didn't find a match, therefore it failed. So what if we actually make it correct this time? Test@test.com. Ha! Would you look at that? It sent us a lovely encoded token that represents just a regular number inside of our tokens table. So if we're curious before we go to the next step, this guy has responded with a token. So what happened under the hood is that it found test@test.com, and I existed. This email matched, and then this password also matched here. And because all that went correctly, it inserted a new token and my user ID of 1 into the tokens table, and then it encoded the token and sent it to me. Let's confirm here, select all. Okay, that's the token we just encoded, so that 2 is represented by this crazy string of characters here. And this user ID of 1 corresponds to me logging in again as test@test.com. You can set some kind of timeout feature on these guys, meaning after a while they delete themselves, but we're not going to bother with that for now. So they're just going to infinitely exist in here. So I'm going to copy and paste this token. That's what we need. So remember earlier I told you guys about our route in users.js where it's /API/users/me. Takes a token that it can decode and it checks if we're logged in, and if it all exists, it should send back our user. So let's check that out. So we're going to go back to localhost 3000/API/users/me. And if we try a GET request with nothing, it says, cannot get, what? That doesn't make any sense. Should be invalid, right? 404 not found. Or do what now? Oh, look at that. I forgot it. Router.use /users will be the users router. Always something, man. I'm telling you guys. Let it recompile. Cool. Let's try that again. And unauthorized. Cool. That's what we expected. Now, go to our headers tab. The key will be an authorization. And remember, we're using the bear strategy. So we'll type in the word bear and then paste our token. Send, and there it is. ID 1, name test, email test@test.com, _created a few days ago. Yesterday, as a matter of fact. And it didn't send the password, so we don't want some hacker to find our password via an endpoint response. That'd be a dumb way to get hacked, like some companies end up doing. Cool. So now our bearer token is confirmed. We're logged in. So this is the login is logged in check that it can run for us. So I'm going to copy and paste both the bearer and the token here, just all this value, so I can copy. Oh my goodness. Did I just mess it up? Uh-oh. There. You know what? Forget it. For whatever reason, that's not wanting to work. Let's go back to our post blogs request. Sending, still unauthorized. And remember the body said, I'm a title yo. We're going to do our get request to all blogs and confirm there is no I'm a title yo or I'm content yo down here. So it's not working. So now in our headers, beyond just the content type, let's type in again, authorization, value, bearer, token, booyaka. If we click send now, we got a blog of ID 8 added to the database. Send. Our new GET request for all includes the one I've been trying to add this entire time. And if we go to our GET 1, we are now wired up. Our server is now running Passport and has an authentication strategy. So hopefully this helped illuminate the server side things for you guys, and I'll see you in the next video for wiring up the front end of our web applications to authorize. Thanks.